You're listening to Three Kitchens Podcast, hosted by Heather Dyer and Erin Walker. We're on a mission to inspire home cooks like us to try new recipes and make good food. Hello and welcome to Three Kitchens Podcast. We have our first guest of 2024 joining us today.
Oh, it is our first guest. And I don't think we have ever really focused on breakfast or brunch foods on the podcast before. So these are all kind of new,
Positive
fun
beginnings.
Yeah.
So we have Deborah Johnson joining us today, and she has written a cookbook called On Rising: Recipes and Rituals for Joyful Mornings.
It's more than a cookbook.
It really is more than just a cookbook. I think it is food with a guide to positivity.
It's like a journal.
Yeah.
A little bit. We're going to let her tell you all about it.
Yeah.
And we made a couple of recipes out of it.
Yes. We have something sweet for you and a savory dish.
And we loved it all. Mm-hmm. So good. So good.
Yeah. So you made a panna cotta.
Mm-hmm. With a roasted berry jam. So good. I had to adapt it due to dairy sensitivity, but you have since made it full fat, haven't you?
Well, it's my reward today. I haven't had it yet. So this cookbook has totally inspired me to make a better routine of my mornings. So I have been getting up, wait for it, guys, a whole half hour earlier.
Hey, that can be huge.
And I have been going and taking my coffee outside. It is my new morning ritual.
Whatever works for you. She's a big believer in having time for yourself, and we are buying it, especially if you can bring food into it.
Yes. So I have completed this ritual 5 times. Yay me.
So you've earned?
So I've earned my panna cotta. And we should briefly say that I made a...
Oh, you forgot.
I made a Mexican chorizo and biscuits. So I made little...
breakfast sandwiches.
Yeah, to put on these fresh biscuits. And
yum.
I also had to do some modifications to it, and they totally worked. So her recipes are really good if you don't have exactly what she's got. They're flexible, they're delicious, they're gonna make you so
Those
happy.
Biscuits are like sky high flaky biscuits, like so good.
Yeah. All right, so let's wrap this up as soon as possible because I've done my job. I want my treat.
And listeners wants to get on to hearing from Deborah. So Deborah, welcome to Three Kitchens Podcast. We're so happy to have you here because we have just been waiting to talk to you about your book.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
So tell us about your book, On Rising: Recipes and Rituals for Joyful Mornings. It just, already by the title, it feels good.
Oh, that makes me so happy because, titles are a big deal and you have to eventually just pick one. So I'm glad that it resonated. I had a childhood dream of writing my own cookbook because I taught myself to cook as a kid who was thankfully left unsupervised in the kitchen. And I'm so grateful to my mom for that.
Oh, wow.
And so the kitchen kind of became my playground, and testing recipes was like my form of play. And I would go through my mom's old cookbooks and just led by my base desires for delicious food.
Nice.
But also just I loved seeing the smiles it brought to my family, and our house growing up was always filled with guests and visitors. And so quickly when I showed that I liked cooking, I was thrown in to taking a little more responsibility for feeding the steady stream of guests that my parents were always inviting over. And because it brought me so much joy, I had this just little spark of like, wow, I wonder if one day I could write a cookbook. And then, life happens and, adulthood happens and dreams become.
They sit there and they always are present, but sort of always in the background. Yeah.
They become like daydreams as opposed to real concrete dreams. Yeah.
And so this one was kind of in the back of the closet of my brain. And then I kind of miraculously was in a season of life where I got to revisit dreams and revisit that back closet of my brain. And this dream was just still steadily there. And I realized I'm not getting younger and life is just going to keep going unless I make this a priority. So with the support of my very selfless and wonderful husband, I decided to just go for it and give it my best shot and hopefully write a book that would empower women my age to feel comfortable and joyous in the kitchen. It started from there. I was living in downtown Dallas at the time, and I'm not sure if you guys ever encounter this, but in my friend group in downtown Dallas, nobody, I can think of one friend who enjoyed cooking.
Oh, wow.
And this is not sort of judgment at all, but it was like a, ugh, or like, oh, that's a very niche skill, or oh, what a chore, or so going out and DoorDash were what our social lives revolved around. But I know the very specific joy that comes from having people into your home and cooking for them, and even aside from guests, just your own family and friends,
Yeah.
So it felt more important to me than ever because I felt like there was a big space for reimagining the kitchen.
I love that.
Yeah, it's almost become too easy to not cook in the way that we live our lives, even compared to our parents' generation. There's so many less opportunities to sit down and gather with people and eat a home-cooked meal and get into the kitchen and just get in there and try something and have fun and
Yes.
find out the joy that it brings, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and it's okay to fail.
Yes.
I do all the time. Like when it feels like a chore and like, oh, I just have to cook every night. Like you see those memes all the time where it's like, I didn't realize being an adult meant figuring out dinner every night forever and ever the rest of my life. And it's like this horrible sentence we all have to pay, like a prison sentence or something. But if you find the thing that maybe it's just a small thing that you like to cook, and then you can build on it.
Yeah. And I think a great starting point is, what do you really like to eat? Because when people ask what I cook, it's what I crave, and if you make food that really makes you happy, it's like with any habit, you'll stick with what is rewarding. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get the feedback from the people that are eating the food you create too, right? Like it makes me want to cook dinner when I hear my kids say, oh, this is so awesome. This is so good. I love this for dinner. If they complained about every single meal I put in front of them, I would probably think it's a chore too.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's a really important point because I hear a lot of my friends feeling so discouraged because they don't get very positive feedback from their families. But I think like with any skill, you start as a beginner and your first meal is probably not going to be a home run. The first song you play on piano is not usually auditory, but just to give yourself like that space to learn before needing it to be like, wow, this is amazing, every time, because it'll get there. It takes a little bit of time.
I was gonna say, like, even our families will be like, oh, this again, or oh, I hate this meal, or whatever sort of wonderful feedback that children give us. I've learned to like take their criticisms and be like, okay, so you don't like this. You know what? I don't really like this part of this meal either. How could I do this differently? And kind of like involving them in that creative process and like, well, what if instead of lentils you did rice? Because I don't like lentils that much. Or, you could have cooked this chicken a little less, time because it's kind of dry. Or like getting them to pay attention also, gets them involved in the process. And then it's a growing point, right? You don't get to learn from something in a comfortable way always. And it's okay to get that criticism and to get that feedback and be like, okay, next time I'm going to make it better. Like instead of being like, oh, everyone hates this, I'm never making it again. I'm more like, oh, everyone hates this. How can I make it better next time?
I love that. What a nice way to...
When you decided you were going to create this book, how long did it take? I'm curious what kind of process this was.
Yeah. It's honestly, it makes me cringe so much inside to say it, but I think I need to tell people just like honest expectations. Of course, going into it, I'm doing all this research on writing a cookbook, and pretty much nobody recommends doing it.
Yeah.
Like writing a book, any book is hard. Writing a
Yes.
cookbook, oh my goodness. Because not only do you have to create a ton of recipes and then narrow it down to ones you're proud to put your name behind, but then test them and refine them and then photograph them and style them. And like, just the process is so much more involved and frankly expensive than an average book. So it took me, and I did not know this when I started, or else I would not have started.
Oh no.
But I mean, I'm so glad I did it in retrospect, but it was very challenging. It took me 2 years of full-time effort to write this book.
I'm actually not shocked by that. I've never attempted to write a cookbook, but we obviously look at cookbooks a lot. We own lots of cookbooks. We're kind of in them all the time. And just the nature of this podcast, we test the recipes from them. Like, we're continuously coming up against things. You hear us talk about all the time where I didn't understand the instructions, or I don't know what this means when they say it should look like this, or what, like, there is an art, there is probably a science, there's like definitely a skill to writing a recipe in a way that a home cook like us can take it and make a successful dish out of it. That's not easy.
Yeah. And there's some recipes where like you open it up and you read it and you're like, oh yeah, not today. Even though like you might go and make it and be like, actually, this wasn't that hard. But just because of the way that it was presented to you, you're like, oh yeah, I can't handle that. Right. Like, and the pictures especially.
Oh, as we've tried to fake our way through food photography for like 2 years plus, we know that is in itself a whole other game.
Yeah.
Did you do all the photography yourself as well?
No.
Oh, okay.
Or else it would have taken 10 years.
Yeah.
All of these things I was just learning as I went. But I found the most beautiful cookbook that I had ever seen, which was Huxtabook. And I looked in the back, found the designer, emailed the designer. Hello, I'm some random person from America. They're in Australia. Would you be willing to design my cookbook? Thankfully, they said yes. And they were like, who's your team? And I was like,
me.
This is the team, you and me. But they were like, well, you need multiple stylists and a creative director and a photographer and all this, and I was like, oh, well, that won't all happen. And I had actually, unfortunately, already done half of the photography for the book. So you know how much time each shoot takes.
We probably don't, because we get to the point where we're like, yeah, I'm too hungry and I just want to eat. So this is just going to be good enough.
Well, that's true. But we understand what it would take to...
I relate to the hungry, I'm good very much.
Yeah.
But yeah, my best was not good enough. I'm really glad that they were frank with me to say, if you want to create a world-class cookbook, you're going to need to hire someone. And the process of doing that was actually really magical, because she brought my dream to life in a way that was so much more just vivid and beautiful than I ever could have.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I like when you look at a cookbook and the recipe creator is in the photos. I like that you are in your cookbook. I don't know why, to me, it feels like some cookbooks, you look at it, could be anybody could created this food and served this food up. But the fact that you're putting yourself in your images with your food tells us that you're proud of it, and that, I don't know, it feels like you made it and we're going to love it because you're saying, look at this amazing thing. Yeah. You want to make it too.
It feels like a connection. Like I want to like turn around and be like, hey, guess what? I just made this. Check it out. Me too. Like you want to share with that person because you're sharing it with us, right? It creates that desire to go back.
That makes me so, so unspeakably happy to hear, because if I'm totally honest, when I look through it myself, any picture that has me in it, I'm like, oh, I like cry a little inside, because it feels, I don't know, it feels hard. Maybe do you have a hard time hearing your voice or something like that?
Well, we've gotten used to it now, but in the beginning we were like, oh, I sound horrible.
Yeah.
We had to
Can
tell
you
each
take
other.
like 90% of me out of this, please?
Yeah. And that's how I feel. Like, I'm so proud of the recipe portion of the book. The part where there is me, I feel a little like, it just feels too vulnerable and hard, honestly, a little hard, but I'm glad that it feels connective, because that's what I wanted it to feel, is like, here's me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and speaking of that vulnerability, you share some very personal stories in the book. And for those listening who like to read cookbooks, not just grab a recipe out of it, you're going to love this book, because the personal stories really connect all of it together. You and I share, just in a very small way, a personal experience. I too was divorced at a young age when I was 30. And I know that going through something like that and then kind of finding yourself out of it, I really connected with that story. And I wonder, like, what made you decide to share that level of personal experience in your book?
Well, I chose mornings as my starting point, as you can tell, for this journey of falling in love with the kitchen. Honestly, because you have to start somewhere, and that's something I have a lot of feeling about. And I couldn't really talk about my experience of learning to take care of myself and mornings without bringing up, like, the context was very much that very hard season of my life. But if I'm honest, the first few drafts of writing this, it was just too hard and vulnerable to be specific. So I kept it very vague. And my sweet big sister, when I gave her the manuscript, was like, it's kind of confusing. She was there for the whole thing, you know. She was intimately involved in those experiences, and she was like, if you really want this to make an impact, I think you need to just be a little more honest and vulnerable. And so I did. I rewrote it, bearing as much as I felt like was necessary, not a lot more. You know, I didn't want it to be like, dear diary.
Yeah.
But I did want to be honest about my experience. And I don't want to presume that you relate to this. I'll just say, never mind. I'll leave you out of it because I don't want to speak for anyone else. But I felt a lot of shame and failure and just like all the angsty feelings around going through a divorce. So yeah, it wasn't easy to write about, but I'm glad I did, because there is freedom in honesty.
Yeah, I think that's why it stood out to me, because I do know how all those feelings are a whole part of it. So good for you for sharing and being able to look back on it and make something really cool out of it, out of the experience.
I think it also makes, even if it's not an experience you have, it makes you buy into the other, I don't want to say advice, but like the other part of your book where you're talking about creating these rituals and taking care of yourself. Like, it's not just fluff that you're putting out there. It's got weight, it's got value to it. This is a thing worth doing, and here's why it's worth doing, right? Maybe this is something I can try. Maybe this is...
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and even a friend posted about my cookbook on her Instagram, and she was like scrolling through a page, one of them where I talk about my story, and she had a friend message her. She was like, wow, this gives me so much hope, because I'm going through that and I don't feel any hope. And it just like, that hit so deeply and heavily with me, because I really relate to when it just felt like black ahead. You can't, like, you can never see a happy version of life, you know? And to feel like sharing my story gave someone there's hope, there's something ahead, you know, maybe there's a version of life where I wake up and smile, you know? Yeah. I was like, that's worth it. This whole crazy process was worth it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so great. Okay, so we keep talking about morning, and part of what you talk about in your book is becoming a morning person, and that you chose morning as a time to kind of start your day with the ritual of being with yourself. And why don't you tell us about, how do you start your day? What is this about, this morning for you?
Well, I was not originally a morning person, but now once you get a taste for it, I definitely am. So we wake up with the roosters before dark, and my husband is just wired that way. I think a little more naturally. So we both just make our way to our little chairs next to the fire. It's in the winter, so he makes a fire and we both read. And that's kind of our shared start to the day, morning time before the day has begun. And, you know, before my phone is out and my brain is going. So yeah, it's definitely changed throughout the seasons, but that's what it looks like for me right now.
Erin and I were just talking about this earlier before before you joined us. She's like, I have to get up and get doing stuff, and I can't just get up and sit. Whereas I basically move from the bed to the couch where I have coffee. But I do appreciate when no one else is up yet and it's just me and I can just sit. Because my husband is like, he's just go as soon as he gets up and he starts talking to me. And I'm just like, shh, I just need to sit and like take my time to wake up. But I do love that idea of taking time for yourself, whether it's first thing in the morning or maybe it's in the evening after everyone else has sort of gone to bed. Maybe you stay up a little bit and do your own thing. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like it used to be evenings that we would capture time together, my husband and I, but now we go to bed before our kids do, and it's mostly like, just turn off all the lights, please. I'm done for the day. Like, whatever you got to do it, and then go to bed because I'm done. So shifting it to mornings and having that quiet time and that quiet space. I do like to get up and start doing things. I won't sit, but I do not want to talk to anyone. Go away, don't talk to me.
Don't talk to me.
But I feel like some of that space for your brain to just like do its thing is a gift to yourself too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that you have outlined steps. Like, this is a workbook. It's maybe workbook's the wrong word. This is something that you can use to journal in, and that you've got those steps in there that tell you, make some goals, write it down, put it to paper.
Yeah.
And do things to make changes. And you've kind of taken those like active habit forming sort of steps and put them in your cookbook. Like, not only am I going to make yummy food, I'm also going to make these goals for myself, and here's how I'm going to do it. And like, there's so much positivity in that.
Aww. So
what is the best way that you found that you changed that habit to get into being that morning person?
I definitely bribing myself. I mentioned that.
Yeah.
So I just made my deal with myself that I would let myself have an espresso, which, you know, at that time I was like very early in my career and that was like a big investment. And I was like, I will allow myself an espresso latte if I get out of bed. And if not, none for me. And boy, it worked. Just like having that, like the treat of indulgence if I wouldn't press the snooze button.
Right.
Oh yeah, it got me right out of bed. And then a month later, of course, the first month I was just on the couch like, this is terrible. Good thing I have this latte. But without any trouble over time, now I wake up and my brain is just like, hooray, fireworks, let's go, you know? So things definitely have changed for me through that bribe.
I love that. I love that it's
wouldn't
coffee.
Probably work for me. Well, I mean, I definitely have to have coffee, but I don't think I could bribe myself. I just talk myself around it. I can have that anyways. Should we take our quick break, Erin? And then we're going to talk food. We really want to get into some of these recipes.
Great. I cannot wait to hear what you have to say.
Hey listener, with hashtags like brunch goals, we all know people everywhere love this late morning mashup of breakfast and lunch. But when did brunch become a thing? Here's a super fast history. There are theories, of course. Some say it's from the English tradition of feasting after a hunt, or perhaps the Catholic tradition of fasting before Mass and then enjoying a large meal after church. The word brunch first appeared in print in 1895. So, however it began, brunch is not just a recent fad, and we're pretty sure it's not going out of fashion anytime soon, which is good for us because we're about to cook up some amazing brunch recipes. Let's get back to it.
All right, so we're back and we want to hear with Deborah about her favorite recipes and how she chose which ones we're going to go into her book.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time picking my favorites. I would say the ones that come to mind most quickly are the biscuits, the breakfast pizza, the breakfast tacos, of course, the cinnamon rolls, the scones. I feel like I'm just listing
everything.
Everything. What has been the biggest surprise to me about this is I use my cookbook so much because you'd think I'd maybe have them memorized, but these are my actual favorite things to make. And so I use it throughout the week all the time. My poor little version is marked up and splotched already.
That's good.
But yeah, that's how I chose them. The ones that I found to be very joyful recipes that I'd reach for time and time again that I thought others might.
Nice.
I was really excited about this because breakfast and brunch are, even though I'm not a morning person, that's my favorite kind of food.
Oh, yes.
I could eat it like morning, noon, night. I love having breakfast for dinner, brunch food anytime. If someone wants to make me eggs Benedict, I will eat it any day, anytime.
Yeah. Like I feel like brunch is to be eaten at any time of the day.
Yeah.
All times.
Yeah. I just had waffles for dinner, so I agree.
Yes.
And it can be sweet and savory and even both on the same plate at the same time. I mean, you can put maple syrup on everything. We're Canadians, so we are all for like maple syrup on all the things all the time.
I agree. And you'll notice in the book that there's a lot of maple syrup because I use it as a sugar replacement where I can. That or honey. And yeah, the best ingredients ever.
Yeah, it's so much better than a refined sugar. It tastes better.
It is. Yeah, they add flavor. So now I'm really eager to hear what were your experiences with the recipes. And you can be honest.
Oh, we will. No. Okay, so one of the things you sent us was panna cotta, which is, can you just tell us what panna cotta is? And maybe where the idea came from for this?
Sure. Well, the joy in cooking for me is making a menu that goes together and is like, it's not just the recipe, it's the menu. And for brunch, it's always fun to have something like a little sophisticated that doesn't require much effort, but just feels sophisticated. And to me, that's what panna cotta is. And so I was like, if there's any way I could translate that as like the perfect brunch side, because I feel like I was always, there's a sweet, there's a savory, and then how do you round out the menu without too much effort? There's only so many times you can make a fruit salad as the third thing, like how else could we get creative in making this menu feel really special? And, you could do a yogurt parfait, but this, A, you could make well in advance, but B, it just feels so fancy. Like when you bring out a Greek yogurt panna cotta at brunch, people are like, oh my. It was just like a fun reimagining of a classic European recipe. To me, it just felt like a really fun way of bringing some European sophistication to brunch.
And I had never eaten it. As regular listeners know, I've got some dairy sensitivity, and heavy cream does not like me. So I immediately said to you, Deborah, I emailed you and I said, I really want to make this, but can I make it dairy free? Can I use coconut cream? And you were like, I don't know, I never tried it. So I promised I would not blame you or your recipe if it failed, but guess what? It's awesome.
That's amazing.
It was so good. So I followed the recipe as it is, except instead of heavy cream, I used coconut cream. I used the Rooster brand, if anybody wants to know. And I used a lactose-free sour cream because I happen to have that. But I did use the plain full-fat Greek yogurt. So this is not dairy free. I would call it dairy reduced. This is like the Heather version. It's not a dairy free version. It's like if you can handle a little bit of dairy, but you want to reduce it or you need to reduce it, this worked perfectly. It was so good.
That is so inspiring to me. I can't wait to try it because I love coconut cream. I love the flavors of coconut. And so this is a really fun, exciting twist. Can't wait to add it to my repertoire.
I don't know if it, like when I turned it out, I wanted to turn it onto the plate. It was a little soft. So I think it's not quite as firm as you would get with full dairy, but it still worked and it was still fantastic. And then when like my family ate it out of a bowl and loved it. So it was delicious. So
awesome.
Good.
It was so good. I was just like, how come there's not more of this? How many jars did you make to this?
Sorry, I should have gave you more.
I love that this is like dessert for breakfast. I don't know. It's like you say, it rounds out the meal. I love this idea. I love it.
And it's really not bad for you. I mean, if you can adjust it to, it's just like a lot of pretty wholesome ingredients. So I don't feel any guilt about eating a lot of panna cotta for breakfast.
No, totally. And I did the roasted berry jam on top. I had blackberries and blueberries, and then an extra little drizzle of maple syrup because, as we said,
Canada.
We love it. And it was, oh my God, so good, so good. Everybody, you need to make, whichever version, you need to add panna cotta to your next brunch.
Yeah.
So good.
I want to make this ahead and just keep it in my fridge and not tell my family about it and then just have it every morning for myself. Maybe this is what I bribe myself with because
there you go.
Yes.
I love it.
So good.
That might work.
It might work, but then again, I might be like, you're not the boss of me.
Okay, don't follow my lead.
So I went after the Mexican chorizo that you had, and I love a good sausage dish. And as much as I love sausages and stuff, I really hate the nitrates and all the stuff in there. Like I don't feel great after I eat it. And so I love that you had this homemade recipe for making your own like flavored sausage. So I wasn't able to find, or I didn't do a great job seeking out the dried peppers that our pepper availability is
bummer. I wish I could have mailed you them.
I could have spent some time going around and like we do have some Latin American markets that have dried peppers. I didn't make it there, but I did look up substitutes.
Okay.
And so I used fresh peppers instead of dried ones, which maybe made it a little bit more moist.
And probably spicier.
So I used a poblano and some jalapenos. So it wasn't terribly spicy.
Okay. I have a pretty low spice tolerance, but I would encourage you to go to that Mexican market and get the dried chilies when you have a chance, because the flavor is just next level. It just changes the game completely.
Yeah. And even just with these fresh peppers, I used some smoked salt that we had smoked to add some of the smoky flavor because I wasn't getting that because it was they weren't smoked dried peppers. So I used some smoked salts in there to try and up the flavor, and some freshly ground cumin in there. And I made them, so I massaged it all and let it sit in the fridge for a while. And then I made little balls and then put them into a frying pan and just kind of flattened them to cook them as like little patties. And so I did that, and then I made your biscuits, and we had biscuits with sausage patties in them as like a little breakfast sandwich, and it was so good. I really
that's awesome.
Really like as
yummy.
a quick little to-go breakfast, because sometimes you need those things made and ready because we're shoving humans out the door every day, and so having that like to-go ready-made stuff it's nice to have it and not have it processed and not have it, with all that other stuff in it.
I'm so glad that worked out. And I included that recipe because I feel the exact same way. Like sausage kind of gives me the creeps. So as I mentioned in the book, I'm half Mexican, and chorizo is a huge ingredient in Mexican cuisine.
Okay.
But like when you get it at the store, you're just like, well, what is in this? You know? That makes me feel very uncomfortable. So when my sweet cousin gave me this, long inherited family recipe for her own chorizo to get that kind of flavor, but with just like meat and seasonings, I was like, oh, I am so I'm glad that you also feel the same way. So it was solving the same problem for you and that you enjoyed it.
Oh, I love that's that family recipe that's been handed down and probably perfected over time. Yeah, it was delicious. I loved it too. And the biscuits are so flaky and light.
Good.
Yeah, really, really good.
Yeah, they were tall.
Yeah.
They really like
It really is my platonic ideal of a biscuit is like, I want layers and I want it to be too tall, like falling over tall.
Oh,
that's definitely what you have in my cookbook.
Yeah, I like making biscuits, but I've never had the technique where you explain like folding the dough and rolling it out multiple times like you did. It's always just been like combine everything, pop it out, roll it, cut it, bake it. And so the fact that you layered it so much while you rolled it out was like, that's the key to getting all those delicious flaky layers. Because I'm always like, those biscuits
Yeah.
look taller. Those biscuits look like they have more. Now I know why. So with all of my biscuits now, it's a nice dough to work with and roll out. It takes a little bit of oomph, but it's worth the effort.
Oh, good. That makes me really happy. And I'm so excited that I've learned so much from both of you. I wouldn't have dreamed of using fresh peppers or coconut cream. So these recipes just grew.
Well, and this is what happens when, I mean, you put your book out to the world. Everybody uses it, makes little notes, changes things, maybe to their taste or what, like, you know, I can't find those peppers. So, you know, and you as the author of the book, you don't get to see all of our little adjustments and notes and how we change things and how we make it kind of our own and love it and build on it. And I would think that would be really fun for you to see.
So gratifying. Yes. Because that's my philosophy is I think recipes at best are a suggestion, you know? Like I never really felt like I had to just do it, you know, point by point, very precisely. I feel like recipes give you a framework and then you play, you know. That obviously changed when I realized everything had to get a lot more methodical when I started
Well, yeah.
this project. But to see people engage in that kind of like creativity and play is so fun.
Are any of the recipes in your book things that you learned to make as that, I'm picturing that young child in the kitchen let loose, which makes me think, should I be letting my kids have more unsupervised time at the stove? I don't know about that yet, but I'll think about it. Have any of these recipes, were they things that you learned to cook as a child?
Yes. So, and I mentioned this in my intro to biscuits because that was one of my first loves. I was a single digit kid and I love biscuits. And so I was like, if I can figure out how to make these myself, my life will get a lot better. And it was one of my first experiments. And just the fact that you can transform those couple ingredients that almost everyone just has sitting around into something as magical as biscuits blew my baby child's mind. I was like, magic. I am meant for the kitchen. And beignets are another one where this is kind of a funny story. I had the old like Betty Crocker cookbook and I was reading through it and I had no idea what a beignet was, but I saw fried dough and I was like, great. So I told my siblings, I'm the youngest, and I was like, guys, this weekend I'm making you baked nuts and you're gonna love them.
Cute.
And they were like, baked nuts? We've never even heard of that. Why would you want to eat that? And eventually afterwards, they looked at the recipes and they were laughing at me because I had no cultural context for it other than me sounding out the recipe and making it. But yeah, beignets were another early discovery for me.
Oh, that's cute. That sounds like something we would say now. Yeah, we're pretty honest about not being able to pronounce lots of things, but that's okay. You don't need to be able to pronounce it clearly to make it.
And for it to taste really good.
Yeah, exactly. I've never made those. Maybe I'll have to try that one next. Oh boy, everybody, you're going to love this book. Yeah. And it's beautiful. This is the kind that you could have sitting out in your kitchen or on your coffee table if you're foodies like we are, and I have a cocktail recipe book on my coffee table at the moment. Like, you know, if you like recipes and books about cooking, this is one of those. Or your bedside
table, so you can flip through it and read all the stories and
be hungry when you wake up after dreaming about
and then bribe yourself with panna cotta.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's beautiful. It's fun. Can you please remind our listeners where to find you and follow you and how to get your book?
Oh, thank you. Well, my book is available on my website, www.deborahesjohnson.com. And then my Instagram is the same, Deborah E.S. Johnson, and same with YouTube, Pinterest, all the things.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your book with us and all your insight and your experience. It's been really lovely to meet you, and can't wait to cook more from this book.
Thank you. It was such a joy to talk to you both. I appreciate your time, and thanks for making these recipes and teaching me about them.
Anytime. And now for the fine print. Join us over on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and on our website at threekitchenspodcast.com. Word of mouth is the #1 way people find a new podcast. And remember, when you like, follow, subscribe, and leave a review, it helps more people find us. Thank you so much for listening.
We sound really friendly in the morning, don't we, Heather?
No, we're not.